David Cronenberg is a director that has scared us with such movies as Scanners, Rabid, The Brood, and now he has brought us an exciting, fast-moving drama, The Dead Zone, from a book by Stephen King. The Dead Zone is the first thriller that you've directed that you yourself have not written. Are your visions, do you feel your visions of terror are the same as those of Stephen King, the author?
Well, it's not so much visions of terror as certain other things that I think I wanted to acquire from Stephen and from his novel The Dead Zone. In fact, I think that when it comes to what we think horror is about, I think that Stephen and I do agree very much. But what was interesting to me about the Dead Zone were the differences between our work rather than the similarities, and I was very much attracted to the characters of the Dead Zone, which were a very open, simple, accessible, honest, almost naive, small-town characters, very different from the characters that I normally deal with in my own scripts. And I wanted very much to kind of fuse my own sensibility with that aspect of Stephen King's sensibility, and to make a film that would perhaps be different from either of us separately, but hoping that the strengths were what were coming together, that it could be a very strong film.
Deborah, are there any special problems in dealing with the works of as popular an author as Stephen King and translating his works to the screen?
Stephen King is a really prolific writer, and there's a lot of people who love his books. He's very well known. He writes a bestseller almost every year. And there's a problem bringing his books to the screen because people are so fond of them that you can't choose every aspect of the book to put onto the screen, and sometimes they miss their favorite scenes, their favorite characters, and it's a real problem. In The Dead Zone, we tried to get a perfect marriage of the novel and the film medium, but even then we lost some things.
Your roles, both in film and on stage, have been incredibly diverse. How do you manage to cram in all the experience necessary to allow you to understand the people you're portraying?
I don't really. I'd have to say I'm really a journeyman actor. I'm just passing through here. I'm observing something, and like Diego Rivera, I paint what I see, and I don't try to make any comment about it. I'm just passing through. Images pop up. They conjure up imaginative behavior. I go with that. I trust my instinct, which is generally 85% of the time accurate. I'll take responsibility for that, and the 15% where I'm in the wrong. I love being alive, and I love the challenge of it. I think we're a whole lot better than we're showing, just as I think I'm a whole lot better than I'm showing. So I have great hope for the future, and I have a very, I have to say, extremely optimistic outlook.
In several of your television and feature films, you've portrayed characters who had to act normally within totally unreal situations. Does it take any kind of special effort to maintain your character's sense of reality when everything around him, as in Apocalypse, is irrational or illogical?
Well, you know, you have only to wake up of a given morning and pick up a newspaper, and you have to wonder what kind of world we're living in. We're a drug culture. We've got a higher percent of divorce than any country in the world. We consume 53% of what the world produces, and yet we're only 6% of the population. We have interests in every conceivable part of the world. We're so spread thin, and yet we're asked to live normal lives under the threat of nuclear annihilation, everybody on the globe. So you have to wonder what is sane and what is not sane. I think you have to have, and I don't mean to sound like this to sound like in a religious sense, but in a very realistic sense, in a very personal sense, you have to have some kind of one-on-one relationship with God, or the other, or the cosmos, or something. You've got to have a connection with a far more important reality than what's going on here. You have to find in other people that quality which you best seek in yourself, the very best in you. Not project the worst on others and expect the worst. You have to really expect the best, because times are so anxiety-ridden and so precarious that maintaining one's sanity can be a day-to-day job. I've often felt that acting was above all good therapy, because it gives the actor a license, as it were, to deal in areas that ordinarily he would be arrested for or locked up for. I think our insane asylums, and in large measure a lot of our inmates in some of the prisons, are people who were thwarted in their effort to live creative lives. They didn't have the license. They did things in public that we do in films, theater, so forth, that we're allowed to explore because of the license that they're not allowed to explore, and they're jailed for it or locked up for it, put away, categorized. So I think that in large measure it's the creativity that's thwarted that causes serious problems in the society.
Well, what differences are there, if any, in dealing with a cast that has to portray supernatural characters in supernatural situations as opposed to realistic characters in real situations?
Well, I think that for me, when you make a film, you are creating a world, despite the fact that it might look to a lot of people like a realistic representation of a world that they're familiar with. In fact, that's an illusion. If you look at films that were supposed to be ultimately the ultimate in realism 20 or 30 years ago, and when you look at them now, they're very studied and very mannered, and very, there are many conventions involved there which the people who made the film weren't even aware of, and they don't look realistic to us at all. So I think you have to accept the fact that when you make a film, you are recreating the universe, literally, physically, and in every other way. So that, to me, then, to deal with a character who has psychic powers, for example, or who is a scanner in my film Scanners, there's no difference. I treat it all as though it were absolutely real within the universe of this film. And I think that that's the way it has to work. It doesn't matter whether you actually believe in the possibility of clairvoyance or psychic abilities for scanners to work. For the time that you're within the universe of the film, that is the only reality. Those are the rules of that particular universe. And if the film works, then the audience believes that as well. So when I'm dealing with it on the set, as far as the actors are concerned, and as far as I'm concerned, and as far as the crew is concerned, what we are shooting is absolutely real, as real as anything else. And I think that that's the only way that a film of that nature can be made to work, in fact.
I talked to David Cronenberg this morning, and he felt that the on-location, especially the cold weather and the reality of the set, gave a better performance for the actor. How do you feel about that?
When you shoot on location, especially something like a cold location, the actor doesn't have to get geared up for all the artificial environment that one may encounter when they're on a Hollywood set. Perfect example is the cold breath that one sees in throughout the dead zone, because it is cold there. Had we shot that on a Hollywood soundstage, we would have had to air condition the stage and bring the temperature way down. So the actors, when they're on location and they're dealing with a certain sense of reality and a big scope, they don't have to put up with so much of the Hollywood artificiality.
In a film like The Dead Zone, where you have so many elements working, you have the on-location shoot, you have, of course, the script, you have the actors, you have the cold weather to contend with, you have special effects. As a producer, is it hard to keep all the balls in the air and keep them in balance?
Shooting on location is very difficult logistically because of all the different people that are involved. We have, not only do we have a tight schedule, but we have to bring actors in and out of the city. We have to send dailies to be processed. We have to bring in special effects people, horses, tanks, I mean all the different problems. I much prefer to shoot on location because you get a group of people almost held captive, and it becomes very much like summer camp. And if you can keep the environment fun and each day's work productive, then I think you get better film.
In Blind Ambition, you portrayed John Dean, a man immersed in a world of politicians whose morals and actions were questioned. Was research on that film applicable to the role of Greg Stilson in The Dead Zone, a man who would literally stop at nothing to get power?
Well, I will confess it didn't hurt having that background. I learned quite a bit about the Watergate, and you see, I've got to be careful of lawsuits. But yeah, I did have a pretty in-depth knowledge of what went on with the characters behind the scenes in the Watergate, and particularly the cover-up. So you got a pretty good picture. Oh, the whole country, the whole world really got a pretty good picture of some desperate men in a desperate situation, not dissimilar to the character I play in Dead Zone. But I don't think any of those men were really as hideous or sleazy as the character Greg Stilson, who would stop literally at nothing to get to the White House.
In one supernatural scene in The Dead Zone, your character pushes the button to end the world, in effect. How do you prepare for a moment like that?
Well, remember that it's really a fantasy. It happens in the mind of the lead character, Chris Walken. He has this psychic power to see into the future, and when I meet him at a campaign rally, he shakes my hand, and with the contact, he gets a vision of the future. And that's where this incident takes place, in the future, where I become President of the United States, and I decide to push the button and start World War III and end the world, literally. But thank God it's only a fantasy, a vision, and it never comes to pass.
Well, in the Dead Zone, you had, of course, the man's visions as well as reality.
Yes.
And I think you mentioned at one time that you had made two versions of the visions, or because
yes, there was some,
of the reality.
Well, my concept of how this man's visions, the character played by Christopher Walken, how his visions should be conveyed on the screen was that they should be also totally real, physically real, and that in fact they were so real that in some of his visions he would actually physically be within his own visions. He would be present in his visions. And to me that's how was the most powerful cinematic way to portray the impact of these visions on him, because in the script the story demands that these visions be physically exhausting and emotionally draining. And I thought that if you just played it as though it was something that he was seeing on television or a newsreel running in his head, that really wouldn't convey that at all. You could do that in a novel, but it wouldn't work for the screen. So that even there, we're playing the visions as an integral part of this particular character's day-to-day reality.
Do thrillers or films that deal with something like the supernatural, do you strive for more participation? Is it more of a participative film for an audience than, let's say, just a romantic comedy or a straight drama?
Horror genre and thrillers require more audience participation because it's what we're trying to do is to provoke the audience to emotionally feel something, to respond, to scream, to cry, to jump. And sometimes I think it's a little bit more difficult to do that than in just a drama. It's the same with comedy. You have to get the audience to laugh.
Speaking of artificiality, much has been said and done about special effects. What are your feelings about special effects, and is there a chance, or is that kind of a temptation to have the special effects overwhelm your picture?
The Dead Zone is a really good marriage between special effects and good characterizations, and at one point we thought that it was really going to be a real special effects film, which is the reason why we geared up for a department of 11 men. We had to recreate things like the 1938 Warsaw Poland invasion and a incredible car crash and underwater scenes and things like that. And as we got involved in the pre-production of the picture, we decided that we wanted to put our emphasis more onto the characterizations rather than the special effects. And I think it worked out in the end, where the audience gears more towards the emotional feeling of the people rather than the coldness of the effects.
Well, being a writer as well as a director, what would you consider your favorite aspects of a film? The story, the effects, dealing with the cast?
Well, there's been a lot of emphasis on special effects in the press and media in general. And I think one of the reasons for that is that it's sort of an entree into kind of fantasy films for a lot of kids who are very enthusiastic about film. And their first approach to film, the first thing that gets them very excited about it, are the special effects, partly because of the Star Wars cycle and so on. And also it's because they have access to their own special effects. They can put on makeup. The makeup kits are being sold for kids and so on. But in fact, to a filmmaker, that is just one small element, is one tool in your toolbox, really. It's not, they're really, in a well-integrated film, in a film that works well on all levels, there really should be no one element that stands out above all the others. If you have a brilliant story, but everything else is weak, then you really don't have a brilliant story. I mean, it's not told brilliantly, and that if you have even one actor who overpowers everyone else in a film, that's not good either. And likewise, if you have a film that is very strong on special effects but very weak everywhere else, you really don't have a film that works. So that, for me, all of the elements are exciting. You deal with all of them at once, simultaneously. It's not a linear thing, it's a mosaic thing in the sense that everything happens at once, and you have to deal with everything at once as a director. And for that reason, it's like juggling. Not one of the balls that you're juggling is more important than any of the other ones. If you drop one of them, the whole act is blown.